and we will be getting underway in just a few minutes. I am Barb Handy Marcello. I'm an AARP virtual volunteer. Doesn't mean I'm a robot. I'm just a volunteer coming to you through Zoom. Today's event is called Accessory Dwelling Units. We will feature Janelle Combs and Kate Herzog, and we will be entertaining questions throughout the program. You can type those into your chat button as those questions come up. So are we about ready to start then?
We are ready, Barb.
Okay, then I will turn it over to you, Josh. It's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Barb, and a big thank you to you and kudos for doing that. And a good reminder to all of you that are joining today, if you'd like to volunteer with AARP, there are always opportunities to do that, even in this virtual world. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh Askvig, and I am the State Director for AARP North Dakota, and we're super glad that you've joined us today for our discussion on the Bismarck Livable Housing Series and our event today on accessory dwelling units. You know, for more than 60 years, AARP has worked to promote the health and well-being of older North Dakotans and Americans. We're continuing that work each and every day, and we're allowing folks to take these events. We're doing these events online so that we can safely connect and share information. We decided to do a housing-focused series in Bismarck as we've learned that during the pandemic, more and more individuals are thinking about their potential long-term care needs, including their own living options. And so we're excited to share the second part of our four-part series today. Also, we're trying to help folks uncover what might be available to them right here in Bismarck and decide what is best for you as you age. Finally, as you may be aware, the city of Bismarck recently became the first North Dakota community enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. The AARP network was founded in 2012, and it encourages states, cities, towns, and counties to prepare for the rapid aging of the U.S. population. And by doing so, a community becomes a better place to live for residents and ages. And we want these events to be a forum to share and collect information on how to make Bismarck great for all ages. In addition, we want today to be interactive. So I'm going to start out today, before we get to our guests, by asking you a question. So momentarily, if it's not there already, you should see a poll question pop up on your screen. And we want to know from you, have you seen or heard of an accessory dwelling unit or ADU before? So you can check yes, no, not sure, or maybe you live in one. And if you do, that'd be great. We'd love to hear from that as well. As you're answering that question, I want to just cover a few things, some of which Barb graciously covered for us. Please note a couple of the Zoom features. If you have not found the microphone button, you can find the microphone button generally on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. That allows you to mute and unmute yourself during this event. We are in a Zoom meeting, so at any point in time, you can unmute yourself, but we are going to ask you to stay on mute for the time being. And if you have questions, to please use the chat button. The chat button should be in the center of your screen. It should look like the bottom center of your screen, should look like a little word bubble. And when you press on that, it should pop up a box on the right-hand side of your screen that shows the chat, and that's where we can encourage you to ask those questions at any time during the event. There will be a designated time for questions later on, and we'll do that. With that, if you haven't answered the poll, go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm pleased to introduce our two guests today. Barb mentioned who they are, but we're excited to have Kate Herzog from the Bismarck Downtowners with us today. Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing great, Josh. I have spilled coffee on myself twice, but onward and upward, you know.
Well, that's better than me. My computer did not work this morning, Kate, so I'm just excited I'm joined today as part of it. So good to have you, Kate. We'll get to hear from you in just a second. And also with us today is Janelle Combs, who recently constructed an ADU in Bismarck. Janelle, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Awesome. So before I turn it over to Janelle and get to hear about her story about why she built an ADU and what it looks like, let's see the results of the poll. So Janelle Most from my team, we got two Janelles today as part of it. So the results of the poll today. So good news is, of the respondents of our poll, 73% have seen or heard of an ADU, only 27% had not, and nobody was unsure, and nobody lives in one. So it sounds like we've got some education to do about what an ADU is, which is great, but most people are familiar with that. So I'm excited again to introduce Janelle Combs. Janelle, we're excited to have you here to talk about why you and your family built an accessory dwelling unit right here in Bismarck, and how it's working for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janelle.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity to tell our story. I have just a little bit of a PowerPoint here because I think visuals are a little better. Hopefully you're all able to see the PowerPoint.
We can see it, Janelle, so you're good to go.
So the reason why of my ADU, well, that reason is because of primarily this lady in the middle. That's my grandma, Johnny. You can also see in the middle in the doorway, there's little Carla dog and her foster kitten, Olivia, as well. So my grandma and great with an embarrassing picture of me with my glasses, braces, and permed hair from a point in time we won't reference. But she took care of me. She was the person, my go-to person growing up. And you can see a picture of her with my family there from Christmas of 2019. So she is 87 years young, and she is about 6 years ago lost her husband. They were living in Texas, and she lost her husband, and really there wasn't anyone who was family that was down there where she was living. She was very reluctant to come up here, but we were able to convince her that perhaps it's in the best interest for her and for everyone if she was able to move up. She said the only place she'd go is with me. So her kids didn't get her, I got her. But what really started talking was when Bismarck passed the accessory dwelling unit law, which happened on February 27th of 2018. I was in the commission room and a light bulb went on. And I said, this would be great for my mom, who is living in Fargo, or for Grandma Johnny. So I told both of them, hey, if you guys want to do this, we've got room in the backyard. We're more than willing to do so. Well, Grandma Johnny beat my mom to it. So in December of 2019, she moved up from Texas, and we started this process to do the ADU. Of course, we all know what happened. So February 26th of 2020, my special use permit was granted. That was the first properly permitted ADU in the city limits of Bismarck. And in March of 2020, everything got COVID. So as we're going through it, it's kind of a weird process for us because I don't think anyone's encountered those two situations. But the one thing that I was most thankful for is as nursing homes and other facilities closed down, my grandma was still able to be with us and able to interact and have that contact that I think is so important. So we came, Patriot Homes was fantastic. They're our builder. There's kind of a mock-up of what was envisioned for that detached 608 square foot building, and the floor plan that provides for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. And looking out, that's a picture of while it was under construction. You can see that's from our deck we call it the big house. And she was able, while she was living with us, to watch it get constructed. And I think she watched every board go up. She was very excited to get out there. Another component to that is it was really good. I love taking care of her, but she lived in our basement for a year. And as much as I love my family, it is nice to have a little bit of detachment from them. And I think it also helped her feel much more independent, having her little house that we all weren't around each other all the time. But by the same token, we're seconds away if something needs to happen. So this is kind of what it looks like on the inside. These are the pictures right before she moved in. You can see she's got her own door with a doorbell and everything. So it's a house, her living room there. She's got a nice little island in the kitchen. It's a full kitchen with a full-size fridge, full-sized oven, all of that. And she has her own walk-in closet, as well as her own bath with that wonderful jetted walk-in tub that she absolutely loves. You'll note there's no ledges or changes between rooms. So it's one flooring all over it. So there are no things for her to trip on. She doesn't actually have rugs out except in the bathroom, also a trip hazard, but if she were to become wheelchair bound, she would be able to be in this ADU and be just fine. So this is now with, you can see how proud she is. She loves showing off her little house. She's got her furniture and TV and everything in there, her own washer and dryer, and then out the back door is a little area for Carla the dog to go to the bathroom. So, there's a lot of advantages that she has with this. And this is kind of the finished project. Literally, my landscapers are out working today. We're still working on the brick and everything else because our sprinkler system had to get repaired first. But she's got her little house. It kind of matches the style of our house. And we were able to do this. I drafted a contract. I was able to basically make it very clear what the costs were. And we factor in, it actually is a lot cheaper than if you're doing it on your own. The water bill isn't as much as 2 different water bills, same with insurance, same with taxes. It adds a little to our bill, but it's not as much as she would be paying on her own. We've also got it valued so that it's basically an income transfer of assets when she is done living there. So it's just worked really well for our family. So that's pretty much everything that we have of the why.
That's first of all, Janelle, thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for telling us about Grandma Johnny. It's so great to hear. And at AARP, we talk about family caregivers all the time, and you truly, obviously, are one in doing that. So I think it will help folks on today's presentation understand a little bit more about what an accessory dwelling unit is as part of that. We may have some questions. I have one already. You talked about accessibility, and we'll get to those in a little bit, and appreciated you bringing that up. You also inadvertently, I don't think you meant to, but gave a shout out for the Home Fit program that we're going to do as part of our Passport program next month, the one you're talking about rugs and those things. So great. We didn't even coordinate that, and it worked out well. So appreciate that. We are going to keep moving because I want to get on to Kate here in a second to discuss the how-to portion. But before we do that, we again want to give you all a chance to participate, and we're going to ask you a second question. So you should see a second poll question get put up on your screen here in a second. And it's pretty simple. Hearing what you've heard so far today, would you and your family, do you think you and your family would benefit from an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit? Yes, maybe, no, not sure. So if you can go ahead and complete that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to bring Kate Herzog back. And Kate, you can get ready to share your screen again and get that up, because I know you have a little bit of a presentation as well. Kate, it's always good to see you. And even though we haven't seen each other in person in, well, probably 2 years, like most people, but good to see you virtually. Again, Kate and I have done some virtual stuff together on related topics before this. So Kate, good to have you with us. Before I turn it over to you fully, can we see the poll results, Janelle? Most? So there is 40% said they do think they would benefit from an ADU, and 60% said maybe, Kate. So I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but it looks like folks, we've sparked some interest. So I think folks are thinking about it. So Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about some of the how and why Bismarck needs it. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks to AARP crew for having me on. And Janelle, I find the story really interesting. I'm going to take the 30,000-foot level and maybe talk a little bit about accessory dwelling units in walkable neighborhoods, and that's, I think, near and dear to AARP in terms of livable cities. It's near and dear to our heart in the downtown development world. So maybe why Bismarck needed ADUs or needed that ordinance that Janelle was talking about. It's really about access for all individuals. You know, whether it's age, ability, income, we want to be able to provide access to the downtown, but access to housing also within the city of Bismarck. And so accessory dwelling units can really provide that additional housing in the densest walkable neighborhoods in Bismarck, and the most walkable neighborhood in Bismarck is the downtown. And so if I'm not sure how Janelle's grandmother gets around, but if you can't drive, or you don't have access to transportation, living in a walkable, movable neighborhood is really important. But there might not be a lot of space to build a new single-family home, and so this is a real great option, an accessory dwelling unit, to build housing within an already created, established, walkable neighborhood. So that really creates that independence for an individual that may not be able to afford a car, which is that could be anybody across the age spectrum, may not have the ability to drive a car, they may not have a license, or may not be physically able to drive a car. This gives them that independence. In Bismarck, and I mentioned it here, and Josh is going to send it out, but there is a 2-page document, really simple, on what accessory dwelling units are, just some general rules and stuff about putting an accessory dwelling unit on your property. I think this is a really important map to look at a little bit, because what we've realized in downtown Bismarck is we have so many businesses and so many jobs, but very little housing. And that's changing now. We're building some housing, but it really shows you that if you want access to this largest commercial walkable neighborhood within the city of Bismarck, an accessory dwelling unit might be a great residential option for you. I think on my next slide here, I did put a couple nerd slides in, as I call them, but one thing we noticed in downtown is that we have the highest concentration of jobs and employees with very little housing. And so we recognize that having an accessory dwelling unit ordinance within the city of Bismarck, and particularly near downtown, was going to help us build up that housing in this large employment district. So access to jobs is huge, especially for those that may not drive or may not have the money to do so. I talked a little bit about accessory dwelling units in walkable neighborhoods. Again, for folks that maybe don't drive or don't have access to a car, cannot afford it. I just kind of picked a map spot in downtown Bismarck, 401 East Main Avenue. It's kind of where the Peacock Alley is, if you're familiar with that, is considered very walkable, which means most errands can be accomplished on foot or by wheelchair. It's also very bikeable. So if you're living within this area, you may not need to own a car. And if you can't own a car, again, you're going to be able to do a lot of your day-to-day activities. So that accessibility for all, age, income, and ability, those walkable neighborhoods really provide access to hospitals, restaurants, retail, employment, service. You can live a full life without necessarily having to own a car if you are able to build or live in an ADU in central Bismarck. Those walkable neighborhoods, as Josh and the crew knows, are also really in demand from 2 of the largest populations in the US, which is millennials and baby boomers. And so if we're able to build more accessory dwelling units within these walkable neighborhoods, we really feel like they're going to get snatched up by millennials and baby boomers within the central part of Bismarck. I should just want to mention maybe a reverse accessory dwelling unit scenario that we've seen a lot within kind of our downtown, but in other downtowns across the US, which is that the accessory dwelling unit is actually built for the millennial or the younger caretaker, and they're living in this small space. And maybe that you're able to keep your parents or your grandparents in their existing home that they might feel more comfortable with if they're still able to use it, but need, some care from another family member. So I'd challenge everybody to look at it both ways. You don't have to build the ADU and move yourself out there if you're in that baby boomer category. You might be able to build that for your grandson, live there, help you mow the lawn, but you still have that wall or that separation from them that gives you that independence. So we feel like this is going to be huge, accessory dwelling units, and really encourage everybody to look into it and see if it's something that you could do in your property in Bismarck here. So with that, maybe I'll stop and just mention too, I think the city would also want me to mention this, that don't just go buy one off of Amazon and like dump it on your property. There are a few things you need to do. You need that frost-free foundation. You just want to check with your utilities, but the city's really great and kind of got a checklist there that you can work down to see if it's something that would work for you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for that update and talking a little bit more about why they're needed in Bismarck and what it is. I appreciate that. For those of you that are on, there is a question, and I would encourage the rest of you, if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat, or this would be the time that we had talked about earlier where you can take yourself off of mute. There is a question in the chat right now, and Janelle Combs, if you can come back on, there you are. This is a question for you from Will here. He says, I'm happy to see you thought about universal design while working through the design process for the ADU. What are some other design principles that you learned during the process that helped support aging in place? Will, you stole my question, but I'm glad you stole my question because it's a great question. Before Janelle answers this, I want to point out both now Janelle once on her own and now Will on his own have talked about, as I mentioned at the upkeep, this is the second of a 4-part series. The first one was on services and technology that we did back in July. You can go find on our YouTube channel. We'll talk about that in a minute. Obviously, we're talking about accessory dwelling units today. The next 2 we're doing are on home fit and on universal design. So we have those coming up. But anyway, so Janelle, question is, sounds like you thought about universal design while you were building the ADU. What are some other design principles you learned to help support aging in place?
So yeah, we talked about how all the flooring is that laminate type wood looking or wood flooring, so that there's no bumps. We didn't want the slippery tile. We wanted it to be something that was very user friendly and able to get around without tripping. That also doesn't provide this kind of fake, or you may see that there's something there that isn't there if you change from one type of flooring to another. And we made sure all of the entrances were capable of having a wheelchair go through them. We have that walk-in tub, of course, that is great. She has diabetes, so it's wonderful with the jetted tub to have that. We made sure that also that it was fairly efficient in terms of heat and cooling, so that she would be most comfortable for what she likes, which is not the same temperature that my family likes. So she can have her sauna, and we are in a much cooler place. And everybody is kind of happy she's got that control, but that makes her feel more comfortable also as she goes along. So I think those were probably the ones that I can think of.
Awesome. Next question is from Doreen, and I think this might be for you, Kate. Again, a great question. Are there size limitations for ADUs, and does that depend or not on, I'm paraphrasing the question, but does that depend on lot size? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there are size limitations, at least in the City of Bismarck ordinance. Basically, the residential space has to be more than 300 square feet and less than 800 square feet. However, the size may be up to 1,200 square feet on lots of 5 acres or more. An internal ADU, so within the footprint of the existing house, can't exceed 40% of the entire floor plan of the home, not accounting the attached garage. It also says the footprint of the primary and accessory structure together may not be greater than 30% of the area of the lot. There's also some height restrictions too, but Our planning department is really good about walking people through what that might look like. So I would just go to them and say, hey, you know, can you kind of help me out, figure out the size. I think just trying to make sure that no one's building like a gigantosaurus extra house that, you know, kind of is way bigger than the, you know, this is what it's intended for, is have a smaller home, you know, on that lot or within the lot. So yes.
Great question. And so Kate, you brought it up. I have another question. And for those of you listening and watching, if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or I'll pause in just a second after this question. But Kate mentioned something that I think is important to bring up. Janelle Combs shared her accessory dwelling unit, which was a separate entity from the existing building. You had mentioned one that is attached to the building. So can you talk just a little bit about, there are different kinds of accessory dwelling units, Kate. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And does the Bismarck ordinance talk about both types or all three types? I think there's actually 3 types, if I remember correctly. So
yeah, I think it does address an internal and an external accessory dwelling unit within the ordinance. There's a lot of different names for it too. And we've seen in California, they call them something else. There's junior dwelling accessory units. I've seen in Portland, they have commercial dwelling units, so tiny little businesses also that you could build in, which is interesting, but not there yet. But yeah, there are different rules of kind of if it's for something that's physically attached to the existing structure or if it's a separate structure on board. And I think maybe the couple other things to remember there is just utility hookups also. Obviously, an existing structure is going to have that utility hookup, but you know, for your heat or your water, just make sure they can get it back to a separated unit. We wouldn't want people to get super far into the process and go, oh, I can't get water there, or I can't get electricity. So plan is what I would say.
So, one other question that has come up in discussions about this is, so if I'm interested in building an accessory dwelling unit, can I rent it out? Does it have to be for my family? Does the Bismarck ordinance address any of that?
It does. Janelle, I don't know if you want to take that one. I certainly can also.
You can go ahead. We call ours a granny flat. So that's
there we go. Another name,
okay.
Backyard apartment. I've heard that called that as well. So, but
my dad calls it a mother-in-law suite. I've also heard. I think, and Janelle can let me know if I'm wrong, but I think you can only have one non-related person. Basically, it's somebody who owns the property has to live in one of the 2 units, whether it's the big
and
house,
they don't have to be related though. You could have several people who aren't related. It's just you have to reside in one of them. The property owner has to reside in one, either the little one or the big one.
Sure.
Either one. So, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think that kind of dispels the, oh, someone's going to buy this house and then build a little accessory dwelling unit. They're both going to get rented out. It's going to be this kind of weird situation where this is really for the property owner to add that accessory unit on.
Excellent. So, okay. Well, people, so if you have a question, I'd encourage you to take yourself off of mute. It should be in the lower left-hand corner, and state your question, and then we can address it to them. As you're trying to either find the mute button or think about your question, we do have one other question we want to ask you all that are participating today. And so if Janelle Mose from my team, there we go, we're curious from you about, if hearing what you've heard today, if you or your family would consider building an accessory dwelling unit. Yes, maybe, no, not sure. If you can go ahead and click your response. And again, we're here to help answer questions, address things. I think we've had a great presentation and good discussion today about this, but we want to make sure this is an opportunity to get questions answered. The other thing, or I'm going to pause because I have a tendency to talk over people on accident. So I'm just going to sit for a second.
Josh, I wanted to ask Janelle Combs, does your grandma drive, or how does she get around?
So she would like to drive, but she has vascular dementia. And so it's not good for her to drive at this point. And maybe if she had listened to us and come up sooner, she might be able to have retained that skill. But especially moving to a totally new place. I mean, I grew up half a mile from her down by Wapaton, but she didn't know anything about Bismarck. So language difficulties, yeah, she can't. Either her caregiver drives her or we drive her places.
Okay.
Excellent. Good question, Kate. All right, are there any questions from our participants? We want to make sure we do that. And the other thing I should share, thank you, Janelle Most is beating me to the punch. We are on it today, sharing the results. So it sounds like 80% would either consider building it or maybe consider building an accessory dwelling unit, and 20% are not sure. No one said no. So that's the good news, is I think we've got folks to learn more. A couple of things for there. I want to ask you, I have one question last for each of you. So Janelle, I'm going to start with you. Knowing what you know today, and again, you just built it, it sounds like, and you started in 2019, sounds like just got finished. So it's fairly new on your property. But knowing what you know today in terms of doing this, what would you have done differently, or what would you have, whether either financing or whatnot? And there is another question for you about financing here in a second, but which we'll get to that in a second. Will, we will get to your question in a second. But what would you do differently? How would you have gone about it differently, or maybe you wouldn't have? That you after the fact went, oh, we should have thought of that.
I would have pushed them to do it sooner, partly because, of course, everything only goes up. And then the other thing is the only other thing is the sharp corners on the island that she was so insistent that she wanted, not the rounded corners. That is the one thing that's been just a big old headache. So I would have been a little more insistent on that one.
Well, Janelle, you can come back next month when, as part of our Passport to Healthy Living program, we talk about home fit, and you can talk about how to maybe retrofit some of those sharp corners as part of it. Okay, Kate, I do have a question for you, but there's two questions in the chat that I want to get to. Janelle, did you find, this is from Will, can you talk about financing the cost for ADUs? Did you run into any headaches with lending agencies if you went that route? Can you just talk a little bit about that aspect of it? And Kate, you might have something to add on that too, because I know Kate and I have talked about this a lot. Part of it.
We did not finance, so she sold her house, and what actually we did is she paid for the construction of it. We have a contract, and it says, whatever that amount will end up being. Like I said, the landscaping's still getting done, so around, I'll just tell you, around 150,000 was what it probably will be at the end of the day. And she was able to pay that with cash. What we do is we take off a certain amount every month for real estate taxes, insurance, off that total amount. When she no longer wants or can't live there, we'll then freeze that value, and we have 6 months to pay back her estate or her for the balance of what's left. So if it's $150,000 and we're taking off $1,500 a month, because we do feed her as well and take her all the medical stuff. And if it was 10 months only she lived there, then we would pay back 150 minus 15,000. So there's some wealth transfer happening there, but also the nursing home can't get that except for the cash at the end of the day is the other part of this. So for me also, my mom has agreed that if she is able, what she will do is pay off the rest of that. We'll calculate a life estate, what that value is, and also have a wealth transfer that way. So nursing home protections and all sorts of things. I can tell you, and maybe Kate remembers better than me, it's over $100,000 to increase the value of my lot. Of course, the appraisers from the city come right as soon as you get that done to make sure they can increase the value. So it was well over 100,000. It might have been 110 or so. I haven't gotten my bill yet, so I can't remember.
Thank you, Janelle. Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about financing and that piece of it too?
Yeah, I think Janelle maybe touch on a little bit, and this is with all home projects, but a lot of times you never get dollar for dollar out of it. So if it costs you $150,000 to build it, they might increase your property value by $100,000. You know, you're maybe not getting that exact item, but you can look at a number of different financing options. You could look at a home equity loan. You could look at a personal loan. So I'd get creative about financing it. And then also, if you have a tenant or someone like Janelle has, someone who's paying rent, you know, the banks look on that favorably as like, okay, well, this is going to generate some income. So I think there are ways to finance it. The two hitches are, what's that do to your appraisal? You know, what's your lot worth afterwards? And what does that do to your taxes? Maybe also with that increase in the appraisal. So maybe just kind of have an idea, a budget, as if you're going to build one of these, what's going to cost you, what you're going to generate from it, and then what you think it's going to give you on the. I think the appraisals actually are going to go up once we see more and more of these, because they're going to be in demand. People are going to want to buy houses that also have an accessory dwelling unit, either for the passive income or for you know, family situations. So right now we're still in the under 10 ADUs in Bismarck, and it's a little more guinea pig. You got to have some of the brave people like Janelle and her family to go ahead and do it. But I think there's ways to finance it for sure if you don't have the cash. Awesome.
And I just put a reference to some additional resources about ADUs or accessory dwelling units from AARP's Livable Communities website in the chat link. That actually there's two documents. There's the ABCs of accessory dwelling units, and then there's a step-by-step guide to design and development that might be helpful. And then there are a number of things about accessory dwelling units there that might be helpful for folks thinking about that as well. There's another question from Barb, our greeter. She asked a great question about, are there provisions for ADUs in rural areas of the county, so in Burleigh County? Kate, do you know?
Yeah, you can have ADUs in Burleigh County. Obviously check with Burleigh County Planning and Zoning, you know, about the specifics. I know there are some ADUs in the county. Maybe the also a provision or something to think about is if you have a homeowners association, or you have some sort of covenants or something like that, make sure that it's allowed there, or make sure you know what your neighborhood covenants allow also for accessory dwelling units.
And I know those ADUs are allowed in the ETA in the county. That's where, of course, we see that at planning and zoning and have been publicly advertised. I agree with Kate. You'll maybe talk to whoever at the county. Mitch is the planning department down there. Maybe he'll have some ideas for you. I'm not 100% sure if they've got a specific ADU law like the city does.
So Janelle, just because I get dinged for this all the time when I do presentations.
Yeah. Extraterritorial area. ETA.
Thank you.
Extraterritorial area, sorry.
No, you're fine. I just know somebody was going, what is ETA? And so I think that's helpful to spell out for folks as well. Okay, I'm going to give one last call for questions and make sure we get people's questions answered here today as part of it. And again, you can take yourself off of mute or put it in the chat. And I'm just going to pause for a second. I think for the most part, we've got them. As a reminder for folks, before I turn it over to Kate and Janelle to any last thoughts, as part of it, we did record this, and you'll get the link for this afterwards as well. So if you forgot something that was said or whatnot, you can view it later on our YouTube channel for your convenience as well. So Janelle and Kate, thank you. Janelle, do you have any closing comments before we end today?
Thank you for having me. It's been a great thing for our family, and I can see all the great things, not just for aging in place, but the other uses for an ADU. It's been a great experience for us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Janelle, for being here today. Kate, anything from you?
Yeah, I would say work with Community Development Department. They're awesome. They can help you work through this. We can also, and maybe to Janelle's point, it's not just, it doesn't just have to be for grandma living in this small house. I think millennials are really gonna consider these. They're already living in smaller footprints anyway. They're good with that. So think about it as passive income. Think about it as something that maybe a younger person wants to live in and you're in the big house. I just think there's endless opportunities for accessory dwelling units in Bismarck and with your folks at AARP.
Thank you both, Janelle and Kate. A couple of things before we close up today as part of it. Remember, as I mentioned, these programs are being recorded so they can be viewed later on our AARP YouTube channel. And I believe Alexis is going to put that back up, so you can find them at youtube.com/AARPND. Additionally, I've referenced this a couple places before, but if you enjoyed today's event, you do not want to miss next month's event about home fit. Home fit is some of the things Janelle Combs was mentioning in her presentation about where they build, about not having rugs, not doing things. You can learn simple modifications that can make your home safe and comfortable for older adults for years to come. And you can do that. In addition, we'll be back in October to talk about universal design, about how, if you're thinking about new construction or some things, how you can design to ensure that throughout the lifespan, you can be safe and comfortable. You can always find our events or register for events or find out more at aarp.org/ND events. The last thing I want to say today before we get out of here is that Bismarck is now an enrolled AARP network of age-friendly community. And as part of that process, we're working on, hey, yeah, Kate's giving clapping and high fives and thumbs up. We agree, Kate. And I want to just point you to what was said during the announcement at the City Commission meeting in May, that input from Bismarck residents will help shape the future of Bismarck. After all, engaged citizens build stronger communities. As part of that, after this event, you're going to get a post-event survey in the email. That is going to include some questions that we're encouraging you to fill out and complete, because it's going to ask you questions about what you see as a need and priorities to make Bismarck more livable. We're asking those questions to share with the city as they work on their Together 2045 plan. Please take the 5 minutes to complete that. It will make a big difference, and we're planning to aggregate that feedback and share it with the city to help make Bismarck more age-friendly. With that, again, thanks to Kate and Janelle Combs. I also want to give a big shout out to the AARP North Dakota team that was behind the scenes today. Janelle Mose from my team, Alexis Betts, our intern for the summer, and also Lyle Halverson, who I know was watching. He helped with all the promotional materials. And certainly last but not least, Doreen Redmond, who helped us in the last second make sure everybody could get here today and join with that. Excited to see you all. Have a great rest of your day and see you next month.